seconds here to log in this morning. There's still some folks coming into the waiting room. Thanks for joining us this morning. Great. All right, well, I have 10:01, so we're going to go ahead and jump in and let folks join us as they continue to log in. Welcome, everyone, to the myFutureNC Local Attainment Goal Setting webinar. On behalf of the myFutureNC team, the NC Impact Initiative team, and Carolina Demography, I want to extend a warm and grateful greeting to each of you who has taken the time to join us this morning. My name is Melissa Caperton. I'm the Director of Regional Impact at myFutureNC, which is the nonprofit organization focused on achieving the state's 2030 attainment goal. A few logistics before we get started. We are recording today's webinar, and we will make the recording as well as the resources that we shared today available to all attendees in the coming days. If you need tech support with today's webinar, my friend and colleague, Lashika Hester, is available to help. Her email and phone number are listed on the slide here. A big thank you to Lashika for organizing today's event and for handling all of the technology. We do have a lot of folks joining us today, so you all have been put on mute for the presentation portion of today's meeting, but feel free to ask any questions that y'all might have in the chat box. My good friend and colleague Emily Ganji is going to be monitoring the chat, and we'll address as many questions as we can during our time together. Once we get to the Q&A and discussion portion of the webinar, we will allow participants to unmute themselves so that y'all can share, ask questions and join in the discussion. So our goal this morning is to provide you with information and resources to help inform your local attainment conversations and efforts. Dr. Becky Tippett is going to walk you through the process she and my former colleague Jenny Korn led to determine recommendations on local attainment goals. And that's a key word that I want you to hear. These are recommendations, not assigned goals. As we'll share this morning, based on feedback that we got from the field, we do think these are solid recommendations for local goals, but they are intended to really be a starting point for local communities to have a conversation. To support those conversations, I will kick things off with a brief overview of myFutureNC, talk a bit about our approach to the work and resources to help your community identify some specific opportunities to begin moving the attainment needle locally. But first, let me turn it over to Cecilia Holden, who's President and CEO of myFutureNC, to bring greetings to all of you. Cecilia?
Thanks, Melissa. First, I just want to kick it off and say thank you. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for your continued interest in the state's educational attainment goals. We want to reiterate today's conversation and what the intent of this is. It's going to center around opportunities for the local communities to be able to establish local goals that ultimately will feed back into the larger 2 million by 2030 goal. And so what we want to encourage each of you to do is to set a local attainment goal. And we hope that the recommended goals that you'll hear about today are a good way to start the conversation for you locally. We want you to be able to take these back to your community, figure out what works best for your community. And while we do believe that these are appropriate goals for each of you, we'll defer to the local leaders on what works for you, what feels right back in your local community. And so we see these as a way for our communities to begin and continue to align efforts around the attainment goal, and then to have a goal to rally around locally. And we believe that having this goal will allow our local communities to have that same North Star that we have around 2 million by 2030 as a statewide goal. So for today, without any further ado, I just want to say I hope that everybody is going to adopt a local goal, whatever it might be. And this would give you not only the North Star to champion, but also something to reflect back on, and then to be able to celebrate your successes when you achieve these local goals. So with that, Melissa, I'll turn it back over to you.
Great, thanks, Cecilia. All right. So Cecilia and I both mentioned that myFutureNC is the statewide nonprofit that is focused on achieving the state's educational attainment goal that 2 million North Carolinians between the ages of 25 and 44 will hold a high quality credential or post-secondary degree by the year 2030. And I think it's really important when we talk about the attainment goal that we are abundantly clear that we don't only mean 4-year degrees. We mean bachelor's, we mean associates, we mean high quality non-degree credentials that are valued by North Carolina employers and support North Carolinians in obtaining in-demand living wage jobs. And while the goal is focused on the year 2030 and the attainment levels of 25 to 44-year-olds in that year, as Cecilia said, I would really encourage y'all to think of this as a North Star, right? We aim to reach this goal by strengthening the entire education to workforce pipeline, building a stronger pipeline, creating a smoother pathway to ensure continued success as a state beyond 2030 and for each and every North Carolinian. So as you began to have these local conversations around setting local attainment goals, as Cecilia said, I would really encourage y'all to approach this in the same way, that this local attainment goal is a North Star that you and your cross-sector partners are working toward. Just a quick bit of data for you. As of 2019, an estimated 1.4 million North Carolinians between the ages of 25 and 44 had earned a high quality degree or credential. You know, if we continue down the same path, the current rate of degree and credential production, we will fall short of that 2030 goal. The projection of how far short we will fall is sort of a moving target, if you will, as factors like the pandemic's impact on enrollment are continuing to evolve and be understood. But this bottom graphic is sort of a snapshot of attainment in 2019 along the education pipeline. And as you can see, there are about 978,000 of those 1.4 million degrees that were bachelor's degree or higher. Around 268 had associate's degrees, and around 204 had a credential or certificate. But there were also about 380,000 North Carolinians between the age of 25 and 44 who have some college but no degree, and 600,000 who had a high school diploma or GED. And of course, data mapping back to early learning. So there are a lot of points on the continuum where we can drive change, where we can provide opportunity to improve attainment across the state and locally. And to do so, myFutureNC is looking at attainment from a system-wide approach to really build that shared vision of attainment across the entire education to workforce continuum, from pre-K through to a credential or post-secondary degree that aligns with workforce needs. This approach is really core to the work that we are doing at both the state and local levels, engaging and convening partners across this continuum to work toward that shared vision of improved attainment. It's going to be critical to our success. And through tools like the county attainment profiles that we'll talk about in just a moment, by helping build capacity at the local level, convening cross-sector partners at both the state and local level, disseminating effective practices and leveraging our network at the state and local level to support policy. We are working to advance attainment for North Carolina that's required to meet the needs of today and beyond, including beyond 2030, to really build a stronger North Carolina for each and every learner and worker. So to do this, the work of the myFutureNC regional team, we're leading a number of initiatives across the state. The first many of you joining us today are involved with, which is the launch of our first cohort of local educational attainment collaboratives that we are doing in partnership with our friends over at the UNC School of Government NC Impact Initiative. More on that in just a moment, but those counties are indicated by the various shades of blue you see on the map here. We have also launched a FAFSA network, which is one of the opportunities for growth on our county attainment profiles. That has grown to include 49 school districts across the state this academic year, and indicated by an orange triangle on the map. And we've launched an Opportunity Youth Network, which we just recently expanded to 53 counties across the state, indicated by a red dot. And Cecilia's been working with the John and Belk Endowment on an Adult Learners Initiative at 5 community colleges across the state, which is indicated by a purple diamond. If you're in one of these counties and you're not connected with an initiative that you see indicated on the map here, feel free to reach out to me directly, and we will help get you engaged in the work. In all, through these various initiatives, we have engaged 85 of North Carolina's 100 counties, and there's more to come. So if you don't have a dot or a circle or a triangle in your county, know that we are eager to engage with you and do good work alongside of you. So again, as many of you on the webinar are aware through your own involvement, we have partnered with NC Impact at the UNC School of Government to form our first cohort of local attainment collaboratives. To identify communities, we had an application process earlier this year, which yielded 46 applications that represented 82 counties across the state. We created a cross-sector selection committee to review those applications and narrowed it down to 25 collaboratives that we then conducted interviews with. Narrowed it down to 15, which are part of our first cohort of collaboratives. Those 15 are part of a 2-year peer learning opportunity. And over the course of the next 14 to 15 months, these teams are going to be setting local attainment goals. We'll use data to identify local opportunities for growth and evidence-based practices to help address them. This map shows you the 15 collaboratives in the 42 counties that will be served through this first cohort that we've launched in partnership with NC Impact. Our goal is to eventually fill in all 100 counties in North Carolina, whether it's a single or cross-county collaborative. The myFutureNC regional team will help lead that work in bringing more communities and collaboratives into the myFutureNC network. So for those of you who are not part of this initial launch with NC Impact, do not fret. Our team at myFuture will continue to work beyond this 2-year peer learning opportunity to not only provide continued support to these 15 collaboratives, but to support all county attainment efforts as local leaders come together around that shared vision of improved attainment. We are state-led. We have to be locally driven through ownership, through buy-in, through attainment-focused efforts that are led locally if we're going to meet our 2030 goal. In my role as a regional impact director and with our team of regional impact managers, we are focused on this locally led work. We plan to eventually have 8 regional impact managers, but 1 in each of the 8 prosperity zones, but have started our team with my 4 amazing colleagues that you see on your screen here. Together, again, our team will assist with the development or expansion of local attainment collaboratives, either within or across county lines. So please do make note of who your regional impact manager is if you're not already connected with them. We will be developing materials and guidelines for identifying cohort 2 of our collaboratives and rolling that information out, I anticipate, in early 2022. So one of the key functions of myFutureNC is the dissemination of data to help inform both the state and local communities about where we are, where we're going, and what opportunities exist to help us get there. And we do this at both the state and the county levels. Through the state attainment dashboard, our friends at Carolina Demography are really helping show North Carolina's progress towards the goal as demonstrated through the 18 educational performance indicators that you see outlined here. And as you can see, again, these are aligned with that pre-K through to the workforce continuum approach. If you go to the link we have listed here at the bottom, you can see the most recent data available for each. And where appropriate, comparison numbers to our southern neighbors. In addition, the myFutureNC Commission did set state level goals for many of these indicators that are also listed on the dashboard. As we began our work with local communities around attainment, we aim to create a set of tools to support your efforts. The first tool we rolled out last summer, which is our county attainment profiles. These data provide, these profiles, excuse me, provide data that is specific to the county and region to help local leaders identify opportunities for growth that are specific to the county. Again, I've included the link here at the bottom where you can find all 100 profiles. If you've not yet looked at yours, please do go out there and grab your profile so you can see the really rich resource of data that's available to you. We also have a spreadsheet out there with all of these data points for all 100 counties. So if you like to sort data, you can go out and download that and do some comparisons. These are really intended to provide an overview of the county by looking at sort of those, again, 4 progressive buckets of data that cover the continuum of pre-K through labor market outcomes. And data are pulled from a variety of sources. So it really is sort of a one-stop shop, if you will, of data from pre-K through to the workforce. This is the first version of them. Carolina Demography is hard at work to finalize version 2, which should be available early next year. And Becky will talk through that a bit later in our webinar today. Unfortunately, due to COVID, some data releases have been delayed, impacting our timing, but I do encourage y'all to go out and download these. And as I said, Becky will provide some information on when you can expect the next round of them. So, local goal setting. When the 2030 goal was codified into law and the myFutureNC nonprofit was formed, we began to get a lot of questions from the field about, well, what does this mean for us, right? How do we translate this big, audacious statewide goal into a goal for our community, which is exactly what led to the work Becky did with Jenny to begin identifying recommendations for county level attainment goals. As we roll out recommendations, as we roll out resources, we always first want to gather feedback from the field to test assumptions and approaches and to ensure that we are, headed down the right path. And so late last year into early this year, we had conversations with community leaders and stakeholders in the 10 community groups that you see listed here. They all received the exact walkthrough that y'all are about to get regarding how recommendations for local attainment goals were developed. And we saw input from them on the approach and what they felt they needed in order to support their local efforts. And here's what we learned. First, we were really happy to hear that the 2030 goal estimates that we provided to each community felt reasonable and realistic. Although we had many conversations with multi-county groups, and as you saw on the map, we have several multi-county collaboratives and anticipate that that will be a continued trend as we engage all 100 counties. The overwhelming recommendation was that goals should be set at the county level when possible. We also heard that these local goal recommendations should be shared with local leaders and that ultimately it would be up to the local community to set, to share, and to use attainment goals. Like the state's 2030 goal, communities wanted these local attainment goals to be that North Star. Recognizing that every community is starting in a different place and may have different levels of in and out migration, we wanted to ensure that the local attainment goals are in no way used punitively. And then finally, that in addition to helping local communities set their own North Star 2030 attainment goal, local leaders wanted us to explore the possibility of supporting the development of local goals along that education to workforce continuum, similar to our statewide dashboard that I shared earlier. So before I turn it over to Becky, let me highlight just a few resources to support your local efforts and conversations around local goal setting. And again, we will include a link to this PowerPoint and links to the resources that we're highlighting today and follow up to today's webinar. But the first resource that I wanted to highlight is the Setting Local Attainment Goals Practice Guide, which is essentially a review of the information that Becky's going to share with y'all today. We've also included a link to the spreadsheet that Becky will share this morning that provides the list of recommended county attainment goals. And then, of course, a link to our county attainment profiles to help really support those conversations about how you get to your North Star once it's identified. Let me again just reiterate a couple of points before we dive into this goal math, as Becky and Jenny called it. First, what you're about to see again are recommendations for local attainment goals. These are based on solid mathematical calculations that received positive feedback from communities, but they are recommendations. They are not being assigned to your county. These are, we hope, a starting point for you to consider with leaders in your community. We recommend that conversations take place with cross-sector local leaders and that you discuss as a local community how to formalize the attainment goal and how you communicate that out to the larger public. So with that, I will turn it over to my friend Becky.
Thanks so much, Melissa. So we're going to do the kind of funny Zoom thing where she's going to drive, but I'm going to be the backseat driver, telling her kind of where to go. So we're going to go over first and foremost, I think, what we know when we did the, when we took projected attainment and we pushed it forward to 2030, because the real thing about that 2 million goal is that's the number of people that is needed to kind of to meet this broader idea that the state needs about 67% of the population to have a post-secondary degree or credential. And so when you apply that to the projected 25 to 44-year-old population in 2030, that's where we get 2 million. But really, fundamentally, this is about kind of creating a stronger, economically competitive and prosperous North Carolina with opportunity for all, right? So this is why that goal is important. It's about both economic competitiveness, but also inclusiveness. And when we project forward kind of the prior trends in attainment and which groups were kind of growing their attainment and which groups maybe weren't growing as quickly, what we see, and so Melissa, next slide, is that by 2030, the total population is projected to have an attainment rate of about 60%. And for certain groups, namely white and Asian residents, they were projected to be above that 67% threshold. But we had significant kind of gaps, particularly among American Indian, Black, and Hispanic or Latinx residents that are projected if we do not close kind of some of the inequities that exist today. So if we don't help to address some of the persistent and kind of existing gaps in attainment at all levels of the continuum, this is what's projected to occur kind of with no intervention by 2030. And so not only does the state not reach its goal, but we see kind of perpetuated or compounded gaps across groups. So next slide. Furthermore, what we see when we look by sex is we see that both men and women are projected to kind of see a comparable increase in attainment, about a 6 percentage point increase, but the gaps between men and women in their overall post-secondary attainment are not projected to narrow at any point over the decade. The marginal good news here is they're not projected to widen either, but they're not projected to narrow. So there's really, I think, when we're thinking at the state level, this is where we have this demographic detail. And so the reason I'm presenting this before we talk about local attainment goals is because this is the context that also is going to shape local decisions. So a lot of these gaps, they don't always persist at the same degree or magnitude in every location, but many of the things that we see at the statewide level are also going to be present locally. And in particular, the male-female gap in terms of post-secondary intentions, high school graduation, transition to post-secondary, kind of enrollment in post-secondary and completion is something I think that should be on everyone's mind, as well as kind of consistent and persistent differences across groups, particularly by income, which is not, we aren't able to project by income, but if you look at the prior slide, that was kind of a proxy often for income. So with all that said, now we're going to move on to the county attainment and projecting that to 2030. So Melissa, if you could go forward, next slide. So there's a pretty detailed methodology that I'm just going to talk you through this because we get a lot of questions about how we projected this. And the fundamental nature of projections is that they're very sensitive to the assumptions that you make going into them. So I want to be clear here about the assumptions that we made. In just a second, Nathan, I saw Nathan Ramsey's comment in there about the male-female literature. So that could be compounded by post-COVID stuff. But another thing to keep in mind is that the statewide projections were made separately by race and sex. So we have differences between, like, Asian males have higher attainment than Asian females, and there's some differences in the Latinx group that may change over the decade, but those are all going to be feeding into that kind of male-female gap that we see. I want to note, both for the state level and for the county level, we don't yet have any models that can fully account for COVID. We don't have new data that helps us account for COVID, and we have not yet accounted for the new data from the 2020 census. We won't have the data necessary to do that until probably the end of next year or early 2023. So that's when I'd be looking to update these models. It would be sometime around 2023 or 2024 when we really have the complete picture to go then to 2030. Obviously, there's other data that we can look at in the meantime. What we did was, first we started with looking at the American communities to make these projections. We started with American Community Survey data for all adults aged 25 to 44 for every North Carolina county. So the American Community Survey is an annual survey conducted from the US Census Bureau. And we looked at the percent change with an associate degree or higher between 2009 and 2018. So it's the first year of data we have from the American Community Survey, and then at the time of making these projections, the last year. We adjusted for negative percent change. So counties that said that their population reported a kind of decline in attainment, we set stable at their current rate. So we said you can't get worse, but we're not going to hold you accountable for kind of improving necessarily. Then we're adjusting for extreme growth. So counties that had a lot of in-migration from kind of highly educated individuals and maybe grew significantly over that 10-year time period, we capped the growth rate, potential growth rate, at 2 times the state average. And then we projected that rate of growth that we saw over the past decade out through 2030. So that was for 12 years. And then we have an additional estimate for high quality certificates and certifications. So that's individuals who don't have an associate degree, but they have some education or training beyond high school that confers some level of kind of job market benefit. We don't have county level direct estimates of this, but we do have some estimates drawn from another survey, the Current Population Survey. And this is data that was produced by Georgetown and Lumina to help us understand kind of the likely estimate for this non-degree credential. And for North Carolina, that was 7.5% overall. So we're applying that consistently across all 100 counties. So that's how we projected the attainment rate in 2030. We took past trends and we pushed them forward while adjusting for some inconsistencies and accounting for non-degree awards. So then we wanted to say, okay, that's the rate. How does that actually align with people? So we looked to the state demographers' projections for the 25 to 44-year-old population in 2030. Then you multiply that by the projected attainment. We kind of subtracted to identify each county's non-credentialed population. And then we determined the share of that county's share of North Carolina's non-credentialed population and held that to be the kind of share that you're responsible for, right? So even if your county already had reached 67% attainment, there's still 33% of the population that doesn't have a degree or credential. And each county in this model is held accountable for its kind of fair share based on its share of the statewide non-credentialed population. So this is what we go through in the Excel workbook. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now to walk you through what that looks like in the Excel. So you can see some actual numbers. So again, right now we have the projected 25 to 44 county attainment and the share of the state gap to goal. So you can see here, column A is the county, column B is the current post-secondary attainment of adults 25 to 44, and includes a 7.5% credential estimate. So if you go to the American Community Survey and you sum up your attainment for 25 to 44 and you say, that's not right, I'm getting about 7.5% off, that's because we're adding in that 7.5% credentials. When we take the change and we project forward, it goes to, that's how we get to 2030. And you can see that the change is not the same for all counties. So Alamance, for example, is projected to have a 3 percentage point increase, while Alexander is projected to increase 6 percentage points, And Allegheny was one of those counties I mentioned that had a declining attainment between 2009 and 2018. So they're held constant at 27%. So you can see how the projections account for different trends that were going into each county. And that's going to help us account for underlying age structure shifts and migration differences. So then we look at the projected population in 2030. So that's the total population. And to get the projected with post-secondary, we multiply the total population by the projected rate. So then to get the projected without post-secondary, we subtract, right, that 22,000 from 48,000 for Alamance to get 26,000 without post-secondary. So when we sum up all the individuals without post-secondary, that's kind of the total, their share of the state total without post-secondary. And to get the state to 2 million in this model, Alamance would need an additional 3,883 individuals by 2030. So that if you add that 3,883 to 22,042, you get the goal for Alamance is 25,925 adults 25 to 44 in 2030 with a post-secondary degree or credential, which would yield a total post-secondary attainment rate of about 60%. And you can see over here in column J, in one of our first presentations, somebody said, you know, this is great and it makes a lot of sense, but what if I want to go for more than this? What if I want a stretch goal? And so this is just showing what this would be like if we added an additional 10% to that number. So instead of 3,883, an additional 10% would be 4,271 for Alamance. You can see that that would be an attainment rate of 55%. Now, one of the things I want to emphasize here is that all counties are going to be asked to contribute to the statewide attainment goal, regardless of their projected attainment. So you can see, for example, Wake has a projected attainment rate of 79% in 2030, but it still has almost 80,000 individuals projected to be without a post-secondary degree or credential, which means that under this formula, Wake has nearly 12,000 individuals additional that it needs to educate in order to meet the local attainment goal. You can also see that small places are still asked to contribute, but they're asked to contribute on a scale that's relative to their population without a post-secondary degree or credential. So Tyrrell County under this is projected to have nearly 700 individuals without post-secondary and would need to add convert 100 of those individuals to earning a degree or credential in order for the state to meet its goal. One of the things that we were really excited about here when we first did this was Guilford, for example, has forget what it was, like our numbers prior to including the estimates credentials came right in line with some of the prior estimates that were projected from some other formulas. So we've had a couple of different ways in which we've kind of gotten a lot of feedback that suggests that this aligns well with both current trends and goal setting. But obviously, part of the reason we're here today is to make sure, one, does this make sense to you? What are your concerns with this? And what do you need to know to be able to implement it locally? So with that, I'm going to stop the share, and I think, Melissa, we have time for questions.
Yeah, Becky, we had a question about the high school graduation rate and what year that data was measured. So basically, that was the graduation rate as of when?
Okay, so the high school graduation rate is not baked into this model. So the post-secondary attainment rate as captured right now is coming from the 2018 American Community Survey. And for all counties, that's a 5-year estimate. So that's capturing 2014 through 2018 data. If you look on the state dashboard, the high school attainment rate is currently through 2020, but we're about to update it to 2021 data. But yeah, this is very different than doing a leaky pipeline kind of at each stage. This is looking kind of at net projections and that population 25 to 44 in a way that tries to account for overall kind of aging and migration. It's not always going to be perfectly aligned with a look that would look at the systems currently in the county and how they're producing individuals.
Thanks, Becky. So for folks, So there is a different spreadsheet that's the dashboard, and that's where the high school graduation rate is referenced. So to answer the question, it's from 2020. We had
That one
another.
may be 2019. And the spreadsheet, if you're looking at the old county profiles, I think that's probably from 2019 data. But if you download the spreadsheet, all of there's a worksheet in it that says what year and what data source everything came from. So I'm happy to help you, but I can't always guarantee I'm going to speak correctly. So I'd need to go do some research before I answer about some of the various floating data products we have out there.
And do you want to take other questions now?
Sure.
Okay. One is, could you address how the model addresses what's known about trends in North Carolina demographically, specifically the declining population of high school age students?
Yeah, so I think that's a good question. And the explicit thing in this model is it assumes some level of continued in-migration to North Carolina from other states. So I think that what this model is not particularly good at doing, because it's very challenging to do at the local level, would be to understand the decomposition of what's coming from people who were born in the area and aging in. We just don't have that level of detail to be able to model that well. And then who's moving in or moving out. At the state level, what we know is that the state has continued to grow from net in migration, and we project that growth to continue. So North Carolina is a state that, while we have kind of a stable size child population, and we have what we're seeing in the high school population right now, we're about to have the birth cohort that was impacted by the Great Recession age into and through high school. So we're going to have a brief dip in the high school population, but the state overall is projected to have about the same stability in the number of high schoolers in K-12 for kind of the coming decade. I think where that might shift is that we're seeing a different mix of how individuals are enrolling their students in schools. So we are seeing declining enrollments in kind of district schools, some upticks in charters, and then the pandemic brought a large shift to homeschools. And we're not quite certain how much those things are going to be sustained. So that's a very long and wordy way of saying there's a lot of factors there. We're looking at it, and the TLDR is that we don't really fully account for that in this model because we can't, but it accounts for the balance of migration and kind of those overall factors in the county.
Thanks, Becky. We had another question about whether residents of our state who may be undocumented or DACA students are included in the model or in the goal.
Yes. So one thing to be clear about, while you might hear about census data and census undercounts, there a lot of research would suggest that the majority of undocumented residents are captured in census data. So while there may be a small population that's not fully captured in these numbers, we do believe that it captures the vast majority, well over 90%. So to the extent that that population is included in Aging Forward and our estimates about attainment by demographic group, yes. To the extent that it's explicitly modeled, no.
And this may be a follow-up question we want to get into later, but the person also asked, what are we doing? What are some strategies we can use for that population to achieve the goal locally and statewide? So that may be a conversation, Melissa, you want to have later. Another question is about, someone asked about what opportunity youth priority counties are. Melissa, you want to take that one?
Sure thing. So recognizing that there are some specific places on the continuum that we can help provide capacity at the local level, we have used data to identify 53 counties across the state to join the Opportunity Youth Network. I put a link to the map in the chat. We did have our first launch in September with 31 counties. During that, Becky, who, as you can tell, is brilliant with data and calculations, provided some updated information for us that allowed us to identify 22 additional counties to join. So please feel free to reach out to me. We are going to be sending communication out to those additional 22 counties in the near future. Our next learning opportunity will be December 7th, where we will be highlighting the Rutherford County Mentoring Program, as well as an adult high school in the Tri-County Community College area. Our goal is to really identify some effective practices to not only keep youth on their intended pathways, but ways that we can re-engage those who've become disconnected. And so certainly if y'all have some good programming happening in your communities, we'd be delighted to lift that up so that others might be able to replicate that locally.
I also wanted to add in that for those of you who are interested in understanding some of the, I think we mentioned undocumented, but I think it's important to emphasize the heterogeneity or the kind of variation in the Hispanic community across the state. So while the, there remain many children who may be second generation or kind of first generation undocumented students, the vast majority of Latinx children are North Carolina born or US born. Right, so they may be the children of immigrants, but increasingly you're going to see individuals who are the children of US citizens. So it's important to note that in your community, that population may be very different, and it may be diverse and different within your community. So Latinx Ed is one of the great organizations doing statewide work on that, and I'd highly recommend looking into their resources if that's something you wanted to better understand locally.
And Laura shared a resource, somuchpotential.org, in the chat box as well. If other folks on the call have resources or strategies that you want to share with each other, that would be excellent. And that could be strategies for serving undocumented residents of our state, or other strategies that you want to make sure folks are aware of. Thank you.
Becky, one question we got often, and I'm sure is on the mind of some folks here, is if a learner is educated in my county and then moves to a different, does that count in my overall goal number? Would you mind to just address that?
Yeah, so I think the challenge here is that we don't, in an ideal world, right, we'd have this like wonderful system that click, Melissa gets a credential, like click, Cecilia gets a credential, and then we also know where they are. I say wonderful, other people probably think that's a dystopian nightmare of, surveillance, but so we don't really have that ability. So I think the challenge here is what we're trying to understand is, okay, about how do we improve outcomes for individuals who stay or move into a community. So many of the individuals educated in your communities, depending on where you are, may move elsewhere. And so that may be strengthening the state and helping it meet its goal. But there's not a way to say, okay, here we're able to give credit for that. And again, because this is not meant to be, this is meant to be more of a conversation starter and kind of a North Star than it is to be a, well, we said 2,733 and you're at 2,700, where are those other 33 people? I think one of the things that's come up in some of the regional meetings is is this really best done at the county level, or is this better done at a regional level to account for the fact that maybe your county's doing pretty well, but due to where employers are locating right now, some of your best and your brightest students are leaving to work in the county next door or to go to school in the county next door. So potentially a regional approach to trying to develop kind of regional strategies could be good. And obviously y'all on this call are representing kind of regional collaboratives. So you're already one step ahead of the game in terms of that. But yeah, we can't necessarily account exactly for where credentials were produced, although obviously a state longitudinal data system can help us move closer to understanding kind of how outcomes are attached to high schools or counties and which schools are doing quite well, and then creating students who stay in the state, even if they're not in their current county.
Our next question is whether the goals are beyond the normal pipeline of credential attainment, or if the goal includes that normal pipeline.
I'm not certain I quite understand the question.
Ms. Dede, if you Do you mind to come off mute and clarify for Becky?
So for example, we know, I'm just throwing out a number here, our community college would graduate 100 credentials this year. Is that 100 part of that goal that's on that chart, or is that in addition to that 100?
So that's a great question. So I think that, and it also gets at the challenge between often the metrics that we have and the metrics that we have that are great at the local level are about degrees awarded or credentials conferred and are not necessarily the same as individuals with credentials, right? So some of this is what we are able to measure in the projections are individuals with credentials. And what we know is that, you know, we kind of need to keep the pipeline as it is and also make improvements to it in order to move towards the goal. So the status quo alone is obviously not enough. And then we need to close gaps and improve outcomes. So to the extent that I think it's hard to say, okay, well, that's 200 extra credentials that would be needed. And I think this is where Jenny and I often would talk to people and say, you know, that's really the local conversation is like where if we need to educate 500 more people by 2030 than we already are, where is that going to come from? And that I think then comes down to what is the local mix? What are the local options? You know, is this CCP? Is this adult learners? You know, is this community colleges? Is this third-party credentials? I think that's, I can speak enough to be dangerous there, but not, you know, there's no answers.
I'm in the same boat, Becky, but we are fortunate to have our friend Cynthia Liston on the line today, who's doing some work at the state level around what counts in terms of credentials. Cynthia, would you mind to provide a brief update to folks?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Great to be part of this conversation. And we thought it might be helpful to provide a little bit of context about some of the credentials that we're having conversations about at the state level and that we're sort of poised to roll out to have more of a statewide conversation. And this is really around the non-degree credentials. And so Becky sort of alluded to this, the fact that the projections that she has done for the state and has done for each county include right now sort of a placeholder number. And I think that number is 7.5%. And those are estimates of the credentials below the associate level that we know exist and we know lead to high quality opportunities for individuals who earn those credentials. And the work that I'm helping lead at the state right now through myFutureNC and through the community college system, our workforce boards, and DPI is around how do we provide more specifics to really understand which of those non-degree credentials are high quality, because that was an important piece of that estimate too. It's kind of, frankly, a wild, wild west right now with a lot of these non-degree credentials. We don't know which ones really do put individuals on a pathway towards a living wage, which ones do employers really value, and you know, how can we really align towards those credentials to give students and families and adult learners a better understanding if they're going to go down a non-degree pathway, what's really the best bet for them and what's going to really meet the needs of employers in the state. So what we have done, and I'm really just kind of joining this work within the last couple of months, but it's been underway for more than 1.5 years in the state, is a couple of things that might be useful for you all to think about. The first is that for an initial 10 sectors in the state, the core kind of team that's been leading this work at the state level has done some really in-depth data analysis to start to identify what are those high quality credentials, or as we sometimes call them, credentials of value, and talking to employers about them as well to really validate that. So early next year, we're going to be releasing kind of the first set of these credentials of value, which I think can be an interesting tool for you all to look at to start to understand, you know, are we offering these credentials? To what extent can we think about, you know, including these as part of our implementation strategies? Because eventually we see moving towards making some recommendations. This North Carolina Workforce Credential Council that's being set up will make some recommendations to create a data system, start tracking these more effectively at the state level, because we don't really have that right now, and actually start counting those more officially as part of our attainment goals. So we're not there yet because we've got a lot of work to do in terms of building that data system, but we're moving towards basically taking that 7.5% that Becky has identified as kind of an estimate, and being able to really understand, okay, these are the credentials that really matter, the non-degree credentials that really matter. Let's start counting them and including them in the goal. So that's just kind of a high level picture of where we're going. But just to say, I think from your perspective, know that that additional data is coming, and more specifically, that first list of these non-degree credentials is going to be coming as well. And it's something that we'd encourage you to use as part of your strategies and your work. So I'm happy to answer any other questions, but that's just kind of a high level description of where we are.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Cynthia. And yes, if y'all do have questions, feel free to throw those in the chat. There was a question from our friend Jairo. Is there another state that has done this work and serves as a model we can aspire to? And he did clarify that he means both whether there are states who have set local attainment goals and states that have identified what counts for high quality credentials. And Cynthia, I know that there are states that we've looked to for models around that. If you want to talk about that at all. And then
yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, this is it's kind of a movement, I would say, across states. Most states are in a similar place to where North Carolina is right now. A couple of them might be a little bit further along in terms of starting to build the data system. But yes, and in fact, this work started in North Carolina as part of a cohort working with 5 other states around the country to kind of think about the methodology, how are we going to identify these credentials of value. So there's definitely resources out there and partners that we're working with around the country.
Cynthia, someone else asked if WorkKeys would count in the credentials process.
So that's a good question. I think that, so to go into a little bit more detail, again, there's so many different credentials that are out there, and the way that we have set this up, and we're going to be sharing more information about this with the state, again, sort of, I think, early next year, but there are 4 buckets of credentials, with some of them being higher value and some of them being more foundational, and they have to be tied to a specific occupation and a specific sort of pathway to in-demand jobs, and really sort of related to some sort of occupation-specific credential. I know my understanding of WorkKeys is it's a bit more foundational, and so I'm not sure that it's going to be on the list. We haven't sort of finalized all of this, but we do have a set of foundational credentials that we know are important for individuals, but they haven't been sort of gone through the process of being linked to high-value occupations. So we're still sort of finalizing some of that, but my guess is right now they'll probably more be in the foundational category.
Thanks, Cynthia. We also had a question about whether credentials earned at non-educational institutions, such as with employers or community-based organizations, will be considered.
So for the non-degree credentials, I would say yes. It's going to be a matter of, and this kind of goes to Becky's point, tracking them, but we understand that this is bigger than, these credentials are offered in environments outside of our traditional educational institutions. And so as we think about how to build a data system that tracks kind of at the aggregate level who's getting these credentials, we will look beyond just community colleges or high schools that offer some of these credentials. But it may take us a while to get there, because that's not typically we have collected degree information from educational institutions. And so this is a bit of a new territory for us, but there are some states that are starting to get that data from outside of the traditional educational environment.
I'm going to read the next question because it's so well written and so complex. So according to Dr. Ivory Toldson, if we want to close equity or opportunity gaps, we have to compare within groups and not between groups. We need to focus on comparing the highest performing students against students that need more support within the same demographic. If we can pinpoint the variables that make a difference and replicate the positive practices, we will be able to move the needle. Is the data we've presented looking at intergroup comparisons? Becky, you want to take that one?
I'm sorry, I was reading something else that came through and okay, let me.
That's my job. You're supposed to answer the questions when I ask them to you. It's okay.
Okay, so the data that we're looking at does not support, so I think there's a difference between, there's kind of the projections that we set here, which is one piece of a real continuum of data products, right? And so those the projections themselves do not answer how are different groups doing, because the nature of the data that we have to make the projections does not allow us to answer that. And so if we want to understand how are different groups doing, we actually have to turn to different data products. And so right now, the county profiles and the county profiles don't have as much detail by race and ethnicity or by economic disadvantage as we would like. And in part, they're never going to be able to, because of the magnitude of indicators that we have on there and the kind of explosion or proliferation of data points that would be. But we are building out new tools to help kind of bring to the fore some of these gaps. So we are going to be providing that, and that is something that we've emphasized in prior work. For example, I think it's important to note that when we look at some of our highest performing regions, for example, like the triangle in terms of attainment, that masks some of the largest gaps between racial ethnic groups and students by income status in the state. So it's really vital that we kind of don't look just at the overall, and we also lift up the hood and look at differences within groups. But I think some of these things are getting at the difference between kind of these projections are kind of benchmarking, and they're looking at population trends and trends in attainment. And then there's the inputs, which are not necessarily being modeled explicitly in these projections, but give us kind of, I think, better information about what levers could be pulled. Like there's inputs to the pipeline that give us better information and more detailed and annual data that I think is more actionable at the local level.
Thank you, Becky. And I should have told you I was going to throw that one to you before I read it. Sorry about that.
Sorry, there was, yeah, I was trying to read it and then hearing and reading.
And my raspy voice doesn't help. So I'm going to do better this time. Cecilia, I'm going to pitch this next question to you because you work most closely with the legislature. So someone asked, since the General Assembly adopted this goal, has there been any conversation about changing how the state funds public schools in order to ensure that we award more credentials?
Certainly. So we have a legislative agenda that we champion this session. We will continue to do that. Advocacy is certainly part of the work of myFutureNC. Several things that were on our legislative agenda were very specific to, you know, our goal is 2 million by 2030, and so all of our legislative agenda feeds into that. We know that you have a lot of opportunity to provide input back to us on things that we may want to champion. But I would always invite you, if you've got specific things that you know can help move the needle around policy or funding or whatever it might look like, please don't ever hesitate to reach out, and know that, you know, we're keeping our eyes on all these different gaps and trying to figure out how do we plug them. Our work is centered around readiness, access to an affordable opportunity, completing what we start, making sure that it's aligned with the workforce needs, and then of course it's all centered around two basic foundational components, which are broadband and data. You know, being out in the field, what it really looks like when it gets implemented. And so we would encourage you to reach out directly. You can always reach out to me or through your regional impact manager, you know, to share any good ideas that we might be able to champion.
Great. And we have 15 minutes left. I want to make sure that we have some time to talk about some other data that are going to be available to you to support your local conversations. But I wanted to ask Becky just one more question. Do you anticipate between now and 2030 sort of revisiting the goal math, revisiting sort of these projections and recommendations over the next 9 years?
Absolutely. So I think one of the challenges with this is I think everybody can understand that the world has changed dramatically since 2018, which is when, you know, the last data was put into these things. Not only do I think we have real questions about how the trajectory that counties were on may have shifted, but also how population trends have shifted. So we've gotten new data that suggests that our rural communities lost far more residents than we had anticipated that they were going to in 2020. And so understanding whether or not, for example, like the census was accurate and if it undercounted those communities, and if so, to what extent, what does that mean for 2030? These are all things that we're grappling with. And we don't yet have the information to really kind of put that into a model. So I think that we can look at these projections as kind of pre-pandemic best case scenario for what's going on. The pandemic has disrupted this in ways that we don't fully understand or can't fully model yet. And like I said earlier, unfortunately in my world, new data is often 2 to 3 years old by the time I get it. And so really, I think that we'd want to update this probably 2023 is when we'll have enough data in hand to start to make some of those projections. But I also, Melissa, is this a good time to show the County Explorer to show, but while we're kind of, so one of the things is we're waiting not just for that new data, but we're also really excited. My Future has been, working with DPI to negotiate a new update to the match of NC DPI graduates to the National Student Clearinghouse, which the last time we had data was from 2016. And so when we get that new tranche of data, which we anticipate almost any day now, right, Cecilia? I think that's forthcoming sometime soon. We will be able to actually look at how some of these patterns have shifted over the last 5 years, how they've shifted in the pandemic, and what those implications might be. And then once that's established, we'll be able to update things more regularly, and we'll plan on releasing the updated version of the county profile, because our big concern was we knew the pandemic disrupted a lot. And if we gave you another set of county profiles that had no new data for post-secondary enrollment or first-year persistence or 6-year completion rates, that was not going to enable y'all to make the decisions you needed to make. So we're waiting for that data to update the county profiles, which means we're hoping that they'll be released sometime in the first quarter of 2022. But the other tool that we've developed is called the County Explorer tool. And so this is going to have the data that's in the county profile. So right now it just has data from pre-pandemic, because it's the version of the profiles that were released in 2020 in February, and then later in the year. But what we can see here is you have all the counties on the map, and you can choose kind of the demographic context or various indicators. So this is opportunity youth, for example, and this shows the percentage of, here it's 16 to 19-year-olds neither in school or working. This is because this is, again, the 2020 county profiles. In the next version, we've expanded this to be 16 to 20 to 24. But the other thing, and right now when you're looking at all the counties, it just shows the state. So this is college career ready and math. So for things that have goals, that language is replicated there. And then we also have the information by demographic groups that's not able to be included on the county profile. If you wanted to look at a specific county, you can drill down there, and it's going to change the information that's on the right-hand sidebar. It's also going to provide you a direct link to the county profile to download it. As this is very beta, it actually hasn't been released yet. So this is a super sneak preview. We're kind of in soft launch mode, but we're going to make continuous improvements to this as we get it out, with the big thing being more visual, trying to better visualize differences across demographic groups, and ultimately also showing change over time. Because for a lot of these measures, we do have time series. So just wanted to highlight that this is coming, as well as the updated county profiles. And then the dashboard itself, while it is state level, we provide detail by demographic groups on the dashboard, and that's also being continuously updated. So just wanted to flag that this should be released. We'll be doing a kind of promotion in the next few weeks for this, and then the county profiles will be coming early next year.
I want to echo Nathan's comment there that it's an awesome tool, and the amazing work that you and your team have done, Becky. Thank you so much. I think that's going to be so powerful to our communities who are really looking to identify places that they can move the needle. So thank you for your hard work on that. I'm going to wrap us up here with just a few more slides. And again, all of this information will be shared with y'all and follow up to the webinar over the coming days. So, you know, we do want you to sort of reflect a bit on the information you've heard today. Take a look at the 100 goal spreadsheet that will be included in the resources that we send out, and begin thinking about, you know, whether this feels like it's an estimate that is realistic and accurate for your community, how you can use this to catalyze conversations with your cross-sector partners, and really begin thinking about, you know, whether this is a county level goal that you will set, or if you're in a multi-county collaborative, whether you will consider sort of a larger regional goal and or a county one. And really, we do want to hear from you if there are some resources, tools, opportunities for us to support you in those conversations. We would be delighted to hear from you and understand how we can best support your efforts. So just a quick call to action as we conclude today's conversation. I would encourage you to download your current county attainment profile as well as that goal setting guide. Again, links will be included in the PowerPoint, as well as in a follow-up communication. But those are excellent starting places, and know that more awesome local data are coming your way thanks to Becky's team. Think about, for those of you who aren't already engaged in a collaborative with myFutureNC and NC Impact, who those local leaders are that you can bring to the table, those cross-sector local leaders, to start talking through the recommended goal and determine what those steps might be in order to set a local attainment goal, right? It might involve some board approvals, what you want to do in order to sort of publicly announce any goal that you might set. And then, of course, these are our North Stars, right? But the work we do on the ground in service to our students and to our learners is what's going to allow us at both the state level and the local level to achieve these goals. So use your county attainment profile, use that County Explorer tool to identify where there are gaps and opportunities in your community where you can begin to move the needle. And with that, here's all of our contact information. If you have some specific questions around data, Becky is your go-to person on that. The myFutureNC team is happy to support you. Again, I've listed all of the regional representatives. If you don't know them already, please feel free to reach out to them. And then our good friend Emily over at NC Impact, who is leading this initial network of collaboratives with myFutureNC, is always happy to hear from you as well. Let me thank again Lashika for her technical expertise, so y'all didn't have to suffer through me running it. Thank you to Becky for sharing the awesome work that her team and she are leading around data sharing. Emily, thank you for monitoring the chat, even with your raspy voice. We so appreciate you. And thanks to all of our participants today for joining us. We hope this was a helpful session for you. Thank you.